Right, so this video today is just going to be a real quick video about all the reasons why I find the pine tree to be among the most useful of the eastern woodland trees. So if you live anywhere on the East Coast, you probably have pine trees near you. Here's a really good example of one pine tree that has a couple different really good uses for it. So one of the first things that we learn in fire making and bushcraft is that we need to make a nice base, especially if the ground is going to be damp. And pine trees often shed these big plates of bark, which you can flip over any way you like, and then you can put your tinder source on this. I've used this before when scraping my ferro rod, because I don't like putting all of those pieces of tinder, that fine tinder, on top of this and striking my ferro rod on top of sticks. I find that the sticks kind of fly apart, whereas this kind of is a lot more stable of a structure. Another nice thing that you can do with this, if you're really in a bad situation, is you can use some of these pieces here to make kind of a teepee and shield. You can make a little lean-to out of this if you needed to get a few of these pieces together to help protect your flame. You can just put a stick underneath there, similar to, you know, a deadfall trap, and that can get some of the moisture, the falling rain, away from your tinder source. Another thing that you'll notice if you look at this pine tree, pine trees, at least in my experience, are famous for just having tons and tons and tons of punk wood. If you don't know what punk wood is, you kind of have to experience it for yourself. Now, it's been a little bit wet here. We've had some rain, but punk wood is this rotted wood that this particular piece here has a little bit of moisture in it, but this piece right here is pretty good. You want to be able to push in and feel a little bit of a bounce back, a little bit spongy, and put that into a char container of your choice, flint and steel, ferro rod, whatever. Put that into a bird's nest. You can find it in abundance, and so this is no exception. You also put this near the fire and kind of dry it out a little bit, or just bring it inside where it's climate controlled, and you can get this by the bundle. So another and perhaps more obvious reason for going to an area where there's pine, better use for pine, that is fat wood. And if you don't know what fat wood is, it's called many different things. It's called pine pitch, lighter knot, but most common term that I found is fat wood, and they sell this in Home Depot in a box for like $10. But if you go into an area where you know there's pine, obviously there's pine needles, and here in my area I know that there's many species of pine, and it's one of the only coniferous trees, and so if I find needles, I know I found pine. But I just sawed into this, and you can see the rich colors in that. And what happens is that when a pine tree dies or when it gets injured, all of the sap pools into the stumps and to other parts of the tree, like the branches and so forth. But I find for my use, I like going and getting these stumps. You can process this down and it will burn extremely well. You've got to process this into some smaller pieces, but it burns very well. And I've often had fires with just fat wood. So I go out if I'm in a situation where it's raining a lot, and I know that I have a fat wood source, and I want a small controlled flame under my tarp to cook in while it's raining, and I want to use fire and not a stove because it's windy, then I will use this, and this is excellent stuff. So fat wood is an excellent fire starter. Another good use for pine. So another great thing to consider about pine, it usually grows in pretty good clumps. I don't really go places where I see just one pine tree by itself, although it does happen. But, and this is not the best example, but these pines often, obviously as coniferous trees, they will keep their foliage for a long time. which means that if you're in a situation where you need a little bit of cover from the rain, you can look to pine trees to help you a little bit. These are a little bit, these are not the best example of that, but you may find a good clump of pine trees where you may have some lower hanging branches, and they may be all around you. So while that's not going to keep you 100% dry, in the wintertime especially, here seasonally we haven't had snow as much as we've had rain because temperatures have just been warmer this year. But supposing these were lower hanging branches, 10 to 12 feet, and they had needles on them, that would be a good way to get you out of the rain to start your fire or to just get yourself dry. So another great thing about pines is that pine trees make it very easy to find good kindling. You can see that these branches are dead and they are dry. You can snap these off. Now, fortunately, most of the pines that I found around me, a lot of these have fallen due to an ice storm. And we have other examples from different trees. But you can find pencil lead size thickness in abundance, whether they're dead or alive, and easily collect a tinder source from that. Also, you can certainly use any of these pine needles here to help you get your fire started. I would just really caution that you make a decent sized fire pit for yourself and always have a plan for putting out a fire if it starts to get out of control. Don't start a fire on pine duff.